Coming up in this episode of In Clear Focus.
In retail settings, creating awareness of the brand and its value proposition is what's key. With the advances of RMN and the seamless integration into our tech stack, we're able to say, not just use, educate, inform, and entertain, but oh, by the way, you can monetize.
You're listening to In Clear Focus, fresh perspectives on marketing and advertising, produced weekly by Big Eye, a strategy-led full-service creative agency growing brands for clients globally. Hello, I'm your host, Adrian Tennant, Chief Strategy Officer. Thank you for joining us. NRF 2025, Retail's big show, is being held in New York City this week. Over the past couple of years, the retail industry has been experiencing a significant transformation in how brands connect with consumers in physical stores. While e-commerce continues its growth, brick-and-mortar retail still accounts for approximately 80% of all purchasing decisions. This has led to increased interest in retail media networks, or RMNs, which are projected to represent over 1/5 of all media spending by 2027. Through AI-powered analytics and digital signage, retailers are creating new revenue streams while offering brands creative opportunities to influence shoppers at the point of purchase. Today's guest is at the forefront of the evolving relationship between digital signage and retail media. Ron Levac is the Chief Innovation Officer at Spectrio, one of the nation's leading providers of comprehensive digital signage systems. To discuss how retailers can transform their digital signage from a cost center into a revenue stream through retail media networks, and the role of AI-powered analytics in creating more engaging customer experiences, I'm delighted that Ron is joining us today from rural Wisconsin. Ron, welcome to In Clear Focus.
Hi, good morning. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak about Spectrio and what we do and how we do it for your audience.
Ron, can you start by explaining what Spectrio is and the types of clients you serve?
Yes, I can. What we've always focused on is to provide tools for our clients that help them connect better with their shoppers and their customers. That's a high level. The way that manifests itself is typically digital signage is a big component of what we do. We've acquired many companies over the last 3 decades that had different digital signage content management platform and started to aggregate. And that's how we've become one of the bigger players in the industry, is doing that. But along with that, we do in-store music or overhead music and messaging. We do on-hold messaging. So when you call typically a healthcare type provider, on-hold messaging, that'd be us. Kiosks, Wi-Fi marketing. So you go into a location and there's the public Wi-Fi, the landing page, the post-login page, things like that. So those are kind of the areas that we work on. The verticals, we work on primarily retail. We have a big presence in automotive, QSRs, and then we have the things like finance.
80% of purchasing still happens in physical stores. Ron, how are retailers leveraging digital signage to influence these in-store purchasing decisions?
Well, it's quite the balancing act, because there's always the idea of balancing the attention-grabbing content without making it be the flashing lights everywhere type of scenario. So where it's done well is typically the digital touch points are integrated into a specific use case. And then it's both physically and functionally. So integrated into a fixture, into a kiosk, or it's blended into the environment. It provides some role there, but in the functionality is where it actually provides a purpose more than just trying to sell an ad. And I know we'll talk more about that, but that practical purpose for it. So there's that. In retail settings, creating awareness of the brand and its value proposition is what's key. So if you can do it in a personalized, more interactive way, that's when you get bonus points.
What role does data analytics play, and what kinds of data are most valuable to collect?
So that's a great question. What we typically do is break that down into 3 different buckets. So as far as, just data and analytics, the first one is understanding the shopper behavior. So the count and the dwell time, either by store or by category within a store, the traffic to transaction ratio, the conversion, right? So you understand that for the different locations. Repeat visitor frequency. So how many times does somebody come back to the store? And even queue management. When do the queues swell? so that you can impact when additional lines should be open or there's somebody there and then they exit. So that's when you've got a challenge. We have different use cases where we help alleviate that. The second bucket, we call it campaign performance. So this is where you're gauging the impact of the content that's been created and deployed. So your classic A/B testing, A/B test everything. We tried here, you tried there, try this, try that. And then you see if you've got the ability, and this is what's key, if you've got the ability to measure the impact, dwell time, engagement, proximity, touches, gaze, things like that, then you have the ability to measure the effectiveness of all the different content. And what that helps you do is if that engagement starts to drop, you then are able to identify it's time for a refresh. So imagine you getting whatever grade for the content that's out there. And after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it starts to dip. In this particular region, it's time to do a refresh. And then from that, there's just the basic metric of quantifying the effectiveness of the campaign. And then with this data, if it's in real time, then you're actually able to leverage it during the responsive content as well. We have this concept of touchless interactive. The idea that there's a screen running and there's nobody in the proximity of it, which means the content should be in such that you see it from a distance. Large font, big graphics, things like that. And then it detects somebody within 12 feet. Well, that's the job of that screen now changed to try to bring them in to engage. So then it says, hey, come here, I got some more info on whatever. So then the person then got within 3, 4, 5 feet, the engagement zone. And now all of a sudden there's a lot more detail. This is the product that's on sale. These are the features, that type of thing. And then at the end of that, it could say, hey, you also interested in this? And then if they stick around, then it goes to the next thing. If they disappeared, then it goes back to the attraction, getting the attraction. So this is just examples of the value of understanding what's going on in front of a screen so that it could influence the content, make it a more personalized experience, again, the content triggering. The third place that we look at data as being critical is location performance. So not all areas of the US are the same. Not all content, not all your campaigns, all that would perform the same. So the ability to look at individual or regional stores and seeing what works best where, the idea of what are your top 5 performing, bottom 5 performing, and looking at their lessons learned from the top 5 that you can impact on the bottom 5 and start raising the average type of thing. Then on the location performance, of course, also the staffing level decisions. If you've got a sense of number of people that engage in whatever sections of the store, you have the ability to influence your staffing of when you need somebody where.
How can brands measure the effectiveness of their in-store digital advertising compared to their other more traditional media spend?
Sure. Well, this is where it starts to get exciting. Because the more traditional, like online, where you can track in real time number of opens, the number of impressions, the number of clicks for anything that you put out there. In-store campaigns historically have been more of you launch and you kind of hope that it works, right? That's been more of the situation. So a brand would initiate a campaign and wait for the sales results to measure if it was effective or not, which could be a day, a week, but it's typically a month or 2, right? So there's a significant lag there. What you have the ability to do now is you launch the campaign and say within a week, you're able to get some of the leading indicators as to whether it'll be performing better or not, and then make adjustments if necessary. So for example, if it ended up that it wasn't working, you can have the traffic going down the aisle. If there's no traffic going down the aisle, then it's a wayfinding sign problem, right? Creating awareness that this product is in the aisle. Got it. But say there was traffic down the aisle, but there was nobody stopping or the product wasn't standing out. Nobody was looking at it or paying attention to it. Then it's more of a planogram problem or a packaging problem, right? But now say you did actually have somebody stopping, engaging, and looking at it, and it still wasn't selling. So then it's a feature set or a price point that's the challenge, right? So you can see where before the product didn't sell. Well, what do? I don't know. Let's try a new campaign. Let's do versus now with this sales funnel that, in the sales world, everybody loves, right? To understand how you're moving through the pipeline. You now have the ability to build that for your brand and for your product in the category. So now with the availability of the different sensor technologies, you can actually build an in-store sales funnel for the brand. So it's quite interesting.
It is. Now, I've heard you say there needs to be a practical, tactical purpose for digital signage beyond just advertising. So can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Sure. So if this was a webinar, you'd see the color of my hair. It would substantiate the fact that I've been in the industry for several decades now. And I've seen this build it and they will come. Somebody made a movie out of this. Build it and they will come. And that model, we've sold into it. I've always been on the infrastructure side, so selling to that. So we didn't discourage this action, but it rarely ever works. The majority fail, at least historically, right? And you've got your Lamars and your JC-Decos that have been successful at it, right? So they've deployed a lot of endpoints and they're wildly successful at monetizing those. But for others, it's harder. And on the flip side, for Spectrio, for decades now, what we've been doing is selling, deploying, and managing networks of digital signage that have that practical, tactical purpose. They're used to either educate, inform, or entertain. And now with the advances of RMN and the seamless integration into our tech stack, we're able to say, not just use, educate, inform, and entertain, but, oh, by the way, you can monetize. So that's a big difference. So what that looked like is the ability for a brand to create either brand or product awareness at the point of decision. So the shelf edge or the last 8 feet is an example of how that would be done. Or an interactive display that allows the shoppers to compare and contrast product features. So that's either like a kiosk or a lift and learn display. And all of those with that integration with the RMN, with the ad technology, you can have some level of monetization. All the retailer has to do is, or the brand has to do is decide how much of that airtime you want to have for your brand content versus ads.
It's fascinating. Your Chief Innovation Officer at Spectrio, can you explain how AI and machine learning are being used to make digital signage more responsive to consumer behavior?
Right. So from my perspective, it all starts with the sensors. So it's a way of determining in real time more about what the shopper's doing. Where are they looking? Where are they pausing or engaging? What products are they being picked up and evaluated? So once you have that, you have the AI translating that using the sensor inputs into insights. And then that insight is what the platform uses to personalize the content delivery, which makes it more effective.
Ron, what kinds of sensors are we talking about here?
Good question. Historically, we've been focused on computer vision. So computer vision is able to detect the presence and the behavior of shoppers in front of a screen or in an aisle or in front of an end cap. And along with that, profile the demographics because it's using cameras and there's a data model that can translate facial characteristics into gender and age and so on. So that's what we've always done. Now there's new data models that detect logos or other characteristics, things that people are carrying and things like that. That could be data point that would influence, again, that AI that we talked about to create new insights that would then change or modify what's being displayed on the screen. The other technologies that we've invested in are radar technology. So this is what we use when somebody has an emotional reaction to the word camera. So computer vision, you got a camera in it. Wait, you're not putting a camera to detect. Doesn't matter that it's built to meet GDPR requirements and things like that. It never any video stored, images taken, all that. Doesn't matter. It's got a camera in it. Say, no problem. Let's use radar, which does the same thing in terms of detecting the presence, the engagement, the dwell time, proximity, and so on. It just doesn't do the profiling of the demographics. Then other sensor technologies, a whole bunch that do different things to detect engagement with the product. So then typically used in the lift and learn. So somebody picks something up, then trigger different content. So it's more triggering and personalizing the content. So we're going to be showcasing our lift and learn solution that uses specific sensors in HP's booth at NRF this year. They selected us as their CMS partner this year for their booth. So we'll be showcasing that functionality along with the sensor. So we'll have the radar sensor. They've got 6 little vignettes that we've got mounted the radar sensor so you can see the traffic and engagement at each of the little vignettes in their booth at NRF. If you're interested in seeing that in action, that will be there.
Let's take a short break. We'll be right back after this message. In partnership with our friends at Kogan Page, January's Big Eye Book Club selection is Be Data Literate, the data literacy skills everyone needs to succeed. Author Jordan Morrow presents a practical guide for developing curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking to become data literate without requiring a data science degree. Through real-world examples and practical insights, Be Data Literate explains how to master analytics. As an InClear Focus listener, you can save 25% on Be Data Literate when you order directly from the publisher at koganpage.com. Just enter the exclusive promo code BIGEYE25 at checkout. Shipping is always complimentary for customers in the US and the UK. Be Data Literate is your guide to thriving with data-driven marketing and advertising. Welcome back. I'm talking with Ron Levac, Chief Innovation Officer at Spectrio, about the evolution of digital signage and retail media networks. Ron, what are some of the challenges retailers face when implementing a digital signage network? I'm thinking particularly about infrastructure costs.
There's several challenges in deploying technology in retail settings. One of the first go, no-go items is power. So is power available at that particular endpoint? And then if not, then is it technically possible? What would be the cost of doing it? Things like that. So that's really typically the first go, no-go. After that is internet connectivity. Retailers will typically not let you onto their own network. So you have to drop in a new one. And is the connectivity robust or not would be a question. Is it just for a single endpoint? Then cellular would be normally a good choice, but then is there coverage? So those are things to look at. So the internet connectivity is the next challenge. Then the next one would be installation. If it's a simple shelf mount, that's fine. Or if it's something more elaborate, then you need a lift to get it installed. So those are big differences in cost there. The actual digital endpoints, the screens, the players, the sensors, the cost of those things have dropped down dramatically. So it's typically not the challenge. So all of these things impact deployments. You require a retailer or brand to keep in mind when scoping out a project. So the good news is what we've been discussing here is that with the advancements in retail media network technology, there's an alternative here to help offset some of these infrastructure costs with another line of revenue.
Got it. Well, it's NRF 2025 this week. So what trends do you see emerging in retail media networks and digital signage?
That's a great question, and I'm going to use it to plug what we're doing because that's what we're showcasing a bunch of stuff in our booth that should be interesting to most folks. So again, because of the financial impact of our RMNs, we're seeing more and more endpoints being deployed. So in a location where you'd have 4 or 5, now you're talking 20, 30. So very different. And then there's also the conventional use cases, but also where you typically wouldn't be able to justify putting an endpoint in. You can now just because of, again, that ad monetization helps offset some of that cost. But we're going to be showcasing some of these emerging technologies and use cases in our booth. So the first one is we're showing a full color 32-inch electronic ink poster, which is 100% wireless, meaning no data or no power. So those challenges I was talking about a minute ago, there's no challenge. It's all good. So it's e-ink, but assume most of your listeners have heard that term. So it consumes power only whenever the content changes. That's why we're calling it a poster. You don't change it that often. So the use case we're showcasing in the booth is as you enter into a grocery store, double doors swing open or slide open, right there in the middle where everybody's got to walk by. You put this thing on a pedestal and it would have this week's circular, and then it would have what actually they're really important to them is usage of their either loyalty app or their digital coupons. So it would emphasize that with the QR code, and then would have a banner for an ad that you would sell at a premium that everybody would see. So that's interesting. The other one we're showing is a double-sided wayfinding in-aisle display. So back-to-back display that would be in the middle of the aisle. So it would be facing up and down the aisle. And that would have your wayfinding about what's in the aisle, but also a window that's showing ads and a banner section emphasizing, again, that loyalty app or the digital coupons. And what's interesting with that is it has built-in sensors that are able to monitor the engagement in 4-foot sections of the gondolas along the aisle. So that information is important. Back to the reasons why analytics was important to a retailer. People would have an understanding of how well their planogram's performing and all that stuff and how well the traffic's then converting into engagement from different sections. But it also is used in the RMN world to determine the multiplier for the ad placements. That's a pretty interesting one. And a little twist we have on that one, we're actually showing how we can visually validate the delivery of the content on the screen. So back in the day, and I think this still there, is the digital billboards on the side of the road. You would see a camera pointing towards the screen. so that it can be monitored, so that when a brand says, I'll give you $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, run my ad for the month, there's something that visually confirms that ad was actually displayed. Well, we have the ability to do that as well. So for the in-store screen, and this is all about trying to make it so that the advertisers themselves are more confident that the ads were actually delivered, right? And there's part of the ad tech stack, there's all types of things there that help validate that things were played. So there's a media player that played it, but now with sensors monitoring that those people looking at it and are in front of the screen, and then another sensor that confirms that the screen was displaying the data, a fully closed loop. It should create a greater level of confidence that this technology, this in-store retail media network, is a good place to spend advertisement dollars. Because right now, it's a very small part of people's ad budget is spent on in-store. And the idea is to get a bigger share of that. To do that, create confidence that the ads are being actually displayed and viewed. Another application we're showing is using the larger format electronic shelf label displays. You've all seen those where there's a single product and a number and that. And some of these ESL manufacturers have the larger format, 5, 6, 7 inches square type of thing. So the idea there is you got a category price tag. So think chainsaws, the 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch, and then the price for each one, because you're not putting one by, the product's so big, they're all very. So the idea like that. And then a section of it is an ad as well. So it's an RMN, but it emphasizes product in another aisle. So again, at a premium. So these are premium positions. Doesn't change that much, but you would have something for a product in another aisle that you can sell to another brand. And the last one that I want to mention is, I was just in Taiwan a couple months ago where I saw this for the first time, and we have the privilege of showing it in our booth at NRF. It's a 60-inch micro-LED display. So what's interesting with micro-LED is that the term's been used, but now this is really micro-LED. So this is the true micro-LED versus what people would say, hey, it's micro, it's really teeny. So you got to think of it as a high-def 60-inch display. The pixels, where historically, you have your pixel and right next to it the next pixel, so there's no air gap. Here, there's call it a massive air gap. What that translates into is transparency. If the dot's not lit, you're seeing through it. So we've got a tremendous content production team here. So they've been working with content that makes it look really cool. So the idea is you got this big 60-inch display and you can see through it. And all of a sudden things happen. And, so you've got thing flying around and it grabs, pulls in the screen. It's just really, it's going to be eye-catching. We're expecting it to be a big impact at the show. It's the latest in micro-LED display technology. So it's definitely something, if you're looking for something new and exciting, check that out. Definitely would recommend making special effort to go and see that. Which then brings me to, where is that, right? I'm sure you're just about to ask. So this is, we're in booth 633 with our partner Signage.
Perfect. Ron, I'm curious, as retail media networks become more sophisticated, how do you see the relationship between brands, retailers, advertising agencies, and indeed any other types of content creators evolving?
What's critical here in the RMN space, there's been, sometimes referred to as taxes, but there's been different people at different layers. And everybody grabs a package, tosses it over this way, and I get my 5 cents. And the next guy gets his 5 cents, next, and so on. So a collapsing of the space is happening. So Spectrio provides the full ad tech connecting to all of the different demand agencies. And we've got a slew of people that focus on creating demand. And then we drive that all the way to the screens, which then allows our clients, this is supposed to be generating another line of revenue for, to have a bigger chunk, right? So it's more dollars for the advertiser and the retailer, and then just fewer dollars being spent in between. So that's definitely seeing that go that way as more and more companies are integrating that ad tech. What we're pushing is transparency. So when you ask about the relationships between the brands, the retailers, the agencies and all that, transparency is key. There's a model out there that's, I don't know, I've spoken to some retailers that speak to the big bad tech companies taking advantage of the naive retailer. And then what that looks like is, if I went up to you and I said, hey, Adrian, I got you a deal. You give me access to all your locations, all that kind of stuff, no cost. I'll put in the infrastructure and I'll send you a $50,000 check a month. You want it? And you're like, hey, dude, I'm not monetizing anything. $50,000 out of left field is great, right? So I do that. And then on the flip side, I'm clearing $500,000. And then you start getting wind of that. And you're like, wait a minute, what did I just do? I just signed a long-term contract where I thought it was a good deal, but it really wasn't. So for us, understanding that there's that level of anxiety, which could slow down the adoption, let's put everything on the table. Let's make it as transparent as possible on all ends so that everybody is getting their fair share type of thing. That would be the other part, is the transparency.
Of course, when we were preparing for this particular podcast interview a couple of weeks ago, you had mentioned to me that with Walmart's recent acquisition of Vizio, you're seeing increased vertical integration in retail media networks. Ron, how do you think this will impact the broader digital signage industry?
Yeah, I think like for us, partnerships and just tighter relationships between both the service providers and the manufacturers of technologies, making it so that it's viewed as a consortium type of thing. So just tighter to make it so that you can compete with the might of a Walmart that buys companies like Vizio to collapse that whole number of people involved in the solution. So not everybody's in a position to be able to do something that dramatic. But for us in the industry, it's really integrate the tech stack, acquire where you can, and partner tightly where you can't acquire.
Sounds like a solid strategy. Ron, if listeners would like to learn more about Spectrio's solutions, what's the best way to do so?
Well, our website's packed with insights and information, so that's always a great place to go. Spectrio.com, spectrio.com. And then again, our booth 633 at NRF would be a great place to come and check us out.
Ron, thank you very much for being our guest this week on In Clear Focus.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again to my guest this week, Ron Levac, Chief Innovation Officer at Spectrio. As always, you'll find a complete transcript of our conversation with timestamps and links to the resources we discussed on the In Clear Focus page at bigeyeagency.com. Just select Insights from the menu. Thank you for listening to In Clear Focus, produced by Big Eye. I've been your host, Adrian Tennant. Until next week, goodbye.